before I get into this week's preview, I have an apology to make regarding last week's post, but my fans are so meticulous, I can't let nothing get past you guys. So it's going to require a quick reminder in how Roman numerals work. A V is a 5, an I is a 1. So therefore, 5, 6, 7. So Sigma Rubicon 7 is correct, is what I said. But underneath, if you look very carefully on the text last time, I said for Sigma Rubicon 8. 8's not right, it is 7.
7, man, that's the number. 7!
Okay, now that we got that cleared up, let's get into this week's preview. 1,000,001 by My Brightest Diamond. Most recent release from My Brightest Diamond a couple of years ago. Her previous album was This Is My Hand, and it was a big hit in my family. Everybody loved it. Anyway, My Brightest Diamond's most recent album is a step in a little bit more of an electronic direction. It actually diverges in a funny way. There are tracks on this album that are distinctly more electronic, more influenced by dance music than the stuff that she was doing on a previous album. This Is My Hand. This is a great album. I love that album. But on that album, she was really coming off as sort of like this mind-reading alien gypsy. And on this one, it doesn't come quite off that same way. On the one hand, there's this kind of, like I said, electronic styles that she's working with. Kind of comes from like almost like Dead Mouse, that kind of music, Daft Punk from time to time. And then like these kind of really serene ballads. And these seem like the two extremes this album plays with, just on my first glance. There are some things about this album that I don't like quite as much as the previous one, just on first listen, but I'm going to give that a little more time before I get into it. Here's a clip.
I'm looking out for someone to see and someone to be seen. But maybe it's me I'm looking for. It's me on the dance floor. It's me I've been looking for.
One of the things I'd say about it is that, especially on the more electronic, the more dance-influenced numbers, it's a little bit less melody than I'm used to. The first album had a lot of really great melodic components to it that you could follow along with, and a little more sort of chanting on this album, it seems like, from time to time. But there are some hooks, and definitely on the ballads, there's a lot more melody than not. So that's that one, My Brightest Diamond. So next one. The 1981 album from Kraftwerk's album, Computer World. Kraftwerk, a very interesting history with Kraftwerk. They started off as a krautrock band, and that was basically, in its own way, it's a kind of like German version of progressive rock, but they're much more influenced by like Stockhausen and Music Concrete and that kind of thing. And a lot of the people that were those came from that krautrock style in the early, late 60s and early 70s, progressing in very radically different directions. Tangerine Dream was another one, and then there's Kraftwerk. Kraftwerk started off as a very kind of noisy experimental band. They started doing more and more electronic stuff throughout the 70s. They had several albums that were very kind of like programmatic, and then they started taking a turn towards the late 70s and early 80s towards more pop-influenced music, and that's really what you see with Computer World here. Here's another little very fascinating video of them playing on a German language show.
Sono l'operatore del mini calcolatore. Sono l'operatore del mini calcolatore. Sottrago e aggiungo.
It was very fascinating to watch that video too. They're sort of like the inverse of what Daft Punk was trying to do later on. They're not like robots making humans music. They're humans trying to make robots music. You definitely, I think, see that in the performance style they're trying to capture in that video. So it's interesting to listen to Kraftwerk. With hindsight, the sound set that they're using with that is very, very, by our standards today, kind of antiquated keyboards. And so it does have sort of the sense of being like an 8-bit soundtrack from time to time. But it's if you kind of frame it in the time frame that it's in, it's a fascinating, innovative work that they're doing with that. Also, putting it in a musical context, like trying to find ways to make that commercially viable. This is way, way before synth music was really starting to be a serious thing. So they were real innovators in that sense, and they were trying to figure out ways to find their way in a commercial environment. So I'm loving this one. I'm going to have to, again, come back to and talk about it more a little bit later on. Okay, next one. Fascinating, great album that I discovered through a Pitchfork review, actually. And I became interested in this album mainly because of its the label that they provided for it. We're kind of past the point in history where people go to CD bins to look for certain styles of music, and so now there's like this interesting way of an album is only defined by whatever Windows Media says it is when you bring it up. So this particular album by Georgia Ann Muldrow, Overload, is a great what Pitchfork calls it. It's a great experimental R&B album, and I think that's a pretty interesting label. And a good one, I think, for this one. What she's doing on this one is definitely along the same lines of like Alicia Keys, current R&B standards, but it's not really mainstream stuff. It has a commercial, has a potential there, but that's not necessarily, I don't think, what she's aiming for. She has these sort of like extremes in the sound. There are these bass lines that are kind of sparse and really thickly harmonized vocal tracks, and then in some cases actually some very deliberate Africanism she throws in there with some kind of polyrhythmic stuff and the drums, and very specific intent with her references to African culture and the sort of street experience that's I think is pretty unique and coming out from a very sort of intellectual perspective. Very crazy harmony that she uses a lot of times on this album. The lead single, Overload, as the title track of the album, is very fascinating, like swirling 2-5-1 modulation going on, and it's very unsettling and very disorienting. So give that one a listen, check it out.
So many folks just let it go, regretting cause they never know what it would take to let it grow. Thinking love something to play with.
So that whole album has this sort of, as my wife calls it, very earthy feel to it, and reminiscent of a lot of really great R&B artists from the last 10, 15 years. Apparently she has a very long history, and she's been sort of flying under the radar as far as I know of the mainstream, but certainly fans of, again, if you like Alicia Keys or maybe even Erykah Badu, that kind of comes to mind. You would probably dig this album a lot. I'm liking it a lot, and I keep kind of coming back to it because it's both accessible, but also kind of challenging in some ways. Next disc that I want to get you guys into this week, I discovered through a Facebook progressive rock group. Somebody had posted about this album, posted and just said, hey, it's a great album, check it out. And you get a lot of those things, but of course the album art got me. And then underneath it, there's everybody after that either said, this is a great album, you should check it out, or I went and checked this album out and it's really great. So I went and checked out the album, and it really caught my attention. It's by this guy, Phil Lanzon, and it's called If You Think I'm Crazy. And Phil Lanzon is a keyboard player, current keyboard player for Uriah Heep. I think he has been since 1986. And he made a pretty engaging album. It's very maximal. It's got strings. It's got steel guitar. It's got choirs. It's got drum solos. Oh yes, I said drum solos. Here comes one right now. The album is very uplifting, which is unusual. You have a lot of albums that are coming up that are very melancholy and kind of dour these days. So it's nice to have that feel to the album. But the trick is you're going to border on some corny stuff with the lyrics if you're not careful. I'm really afraid as I get into this album that if the lyrics are not up to par, it's going to tank the whole thing. Now, I'm not sure if that's the case or not. We'll see. There's certainly a couple songs that on there that the lyrics seem kind of hokey in a way, but it still kind of sells. It's like Spock's Beard used to do. Like they were always able to be positive, but not really fully get into corniness. So again, the more I get into it, the more we'll see. But there's lots in this album that I do like, and it really has those parts of it I can't help it. Kind of go around and hum, That's very nice. We'll see if the whole thing sticks like that one has. Okay, I discovered this last disc, although it's not really a discovery. I mean, I've heard of this disc for years, but I never really thought about it until this happened. I was watching this great documentary on Quincy Jones and was really fascinated by the breadth of his history. He was an amazing jazz musician, producer, arranger, conductor. He's done everything in his lifetime and done it all extremely well, and an amazing character in his own right. But I got really interested in this time where he spent doing arrangements and conducting for the Count Basie Orchestra. I never really put together that it happened. I mean, I knew about him and Michael Jackson, but Count Basie, I mean, that's the big time. So there's a run of albums that he was involved with the Count Basie Orchestra on, and there's in particular an album or two where he was doing the conducting and arranging while Frank Sinatra was in the group. So it came up that this album, Sinatra at the Sands, came with some accolades, and I was like, well, I'm always looking for an excuse to get a hold of a Basie album. I mean, Jesus. He has such a huge library of things, it's hard to figure out where to start sometimes. So Sinatra at the Sands it is, and I got the album, and man, talk about an amazing performance and a great snapshot of what life was like in 1966. And this recording was 1966 in Las Vegas, and it's Frank Sinatra in front of an audience, and he's in prime form. Like singing is amazing. I got a clip for you. This is Frank Sinatra with the Count Basie Band. The year before, it's not him at the Sands, it's 1965, but it's a TV performance of Count Basie doing "Fly Me to the Moon" with the Basie Band.
Fill my heart with song, let me sing forevermore. You are all I long for, all I worship and adore. In other words, please be true. In other words, I love you. Fly, fly, fly.
Man, the band is burning in that clip, absolutely on fire, and incredible energy. Like it's two steps away from just being completely a rock beat there going on, And that's what's going on in this album from time to time throughout it. It's just the energy of the group is amazing, and they're on stage and they're recording, and Frank Sinatra is interacting with the audience in a way that is I don't think people just do anymore. Halfway through, I guess just to give the band a break, he pretty much just stops and does a stand-up routine on his life, and it's there. It's as much a part of that particular performance as Frank Zappa's performances are on the You Can't Do That on Stage that I was listening to the previous week. So I cannot recommend this album enough. If you're even a marginal fan of Frank Sinatra or the Basie Band, if you haven't checked it out, this is well worth your time. It grabbed me for sure, and I'll be listening to it quite a bit. I think there's a lot to take in. Okay, that's my 5 albums. Again, if you have heard any of these albums, I'd love to get your feedback on them. If you want to listen to them and get back to me on what you think, let me know. I want to kind of have, again, looking for a dialogue on some of this stuff, and it'd be really great to have us come back and forth and have me talk about people's opinions on music. If you look back at that first post with the blurry album art, there are some things that I would like to go back and talk about with those albums. So keep an eye out. Again, I appreciate you guys being here, and I'll see you on the flip side. Take care.